Colossians chapter 1. We got a message, brethren, that God has given to us. A message the whole world needs to hear. And, eternal gospel that needs to be preached. And it is for our benefit to remember who we are. And it isn't intended to stop within us. It's intended to work within us and go out from us. In Colossians chapter 1, I'm actually going to just read verses 13 and 14 this morning. For He, that's the Father, He delivered us from the domain of darkness and has transferred us to the kingdom of His beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we are thankful, truly, truly thankful, Lord, for your deliverance, that you have rescued us from Satan's domain, from that world of darkness where we were continually tripping and stumbling and getting hurt and engulfed in despair. That, Lord, you rescued us from that, and you've brought us into the kingdom of your beloved Son. I ask that you be with me today, Lord, as I preach your word, that it would be in accordance with the truth that you have laid forth in the Scriptures, that each of us would consider these things not from my words, but from what you have said in the Scriptures, that we would be noble-minded, search the Scriptures daily to see whether these things are so, and that we would come forth today, Lord, with a renewed sense of what it means to have been rescued and what it means to be in your kingdom. And that as such, we would be, Lord, worthy citizens of your heavenly kingdom. Ask this all through the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. So this morning here, just a few key points that I want to hit. Domain of darkness. I'm not going to spend too much time about that, but I do a little bit. Charlie actually in his prayer meditation gave us a little picture at a personal level of what that was like. I want to talk about the rescue that Christ has done for us. What he did on his end to bring us out of that. Talk about the kingdom of his beloved Son. I think most of us are aware of this, but a key verse here, Colossians 1:13, what the kingdom is. And I'll just say by way of introduction, because sometimes I get going, I don't have a lot of time when I get there. If you don't understand the kingdom scripturally, this whole book's closed book to you. There's no way you can possibly understand what God was doing back there in the days of Exodus when he was in a prototype, a physical shadow really, making a kingdom of priests. Where he was going with that. You can't understand the prophets and what the nation of Israel, what the nation of Judah is about. You certainly can't understand the minor prophets. You can't understand the parables. Well, you're just going to be on the outside looking in, and if you can't see the kingdom of God, it's a bad place to be. So that's important. And the fact that he's transferred us, that he's brought us into this kingdom. We have a new way of life. We have a new place to live. We have a new family. We have a new nation with a new patriotic fervor for the things of God, to seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. So I want to talk for a second about the domain of darkness. I don't know what you think of when you hear the word domain. I don't hear that much anymore, except maybe domain name. I'm not even sure I understand what that means, but in that technology world, there's a domain name. This is your area, I guess. If you have the name, nobody else can come and take it. It's yours to do what you will with it. The Greek word exousios here, and it really means power to act or authority. It's used a lot in the Scriptures, a lot in the New Testament, and I think it can be a good translation of it as dominion. Some other examples, just real quickly, of the power of darkness. So I'm going to use it in the way that the Scripture uses it in reference to Satan's domain, okay? So when Jesus is being arrested in the garden, he says, this hour and the power of darkness are yours. That word power, dominion, domain of darkness as something that was belonging to those of Satan. And in Acts chapter 26, verse 18, when the Apostle Paul, while he's still Saul, but he's recounting that. Okay, he's going to be commissioned, and one of the things he's going to do is he's proclaiming the gospel. He's going to help people turn from the dominion of Satan to God. So Satan has a domain. He has an area. He has a realm that's his. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 2 talks about the prince of the power of the air. Satan has control in the realm of the power there. You know, this might be a little bit of a further connection that maybe isn't completely, I'll let you think about it, but something that hits me is I think about the airwaves, you know, the media, etc. And who's behind that? There's somebody who's the prince of the power of the air. In Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, we know that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but it is against the rulers. It's against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness. So there are powers in the spiritual realm that show up on this earth. And those powers are ones, in the context we're talking about, this domain of darkness of which Satan is control. You know, in John chapter 12, 14, and 16, within a few chapters, Jesus 3 times talks about the ruler of this world. I think it's worth, again, I'm not going to overspend time on this today, but I think we have to be honest in what we're facing every day. It's not like you wake up in the morning and you walk out just into a neutral place. You are walking out into a battlefield and on the devil's home turf, a realm that he controls. I'll just read a few more of these. The God of this world, the Scripture calls him. They're people, individuals around us all the time. And we were there. Charlie mentioned it today, just as himself. Held captive by Satan to do his will. That's the state you were in. That's the state all of us were in prior to Christ. 1 John 5, verse 19. The whole world lies in the power of the evil one. That's the domain of darkness, Brian. That's the world that's outside. That's the world that we wake up, that we are in every day. And there are some demonic forces, and sometimes for me to, I don't know what the pictures do on this stuff. I have no idea what a demon looks like, in terms of pictures. But I know it's important, if we're not going to be ignorant of Satan and his schemes, that we open up our eyes and realize there are demonic forces that are being waged against us every single day. There is the beast from the sea, government, that's anti-Christian. There's the beast from the earth, that's false religion, the false prophet, the Scripture defines. There's Babylon, the harlot, the hidden powers of the world, some of the allure of the world. And economic forces communicated with that. Actually, I was thinking about just talking to some people, and Las Vegas came up. How many of you guys ever been to Vegas? Okay. Now, there is something amazing when you're driving out on that long road and the lights of Vegas, it's like they just kind of call you in. Okay. And if you go down, I don't even know if this is the right terminology. I think there's something called the Strip. And everything about Vegas, there is money. And it is bright, and it pulls you in, and you think, man, this is so great. And the reality of it is, you walk into those places, and that money that's being shown you, you know where that money is coming from? You. They're sucking you dry. Okay? And that's the world. And there are economic forces that are in this. So just a few, I just don't have time for this. But the beast from the sea, there's examples in the scripture. In Daniel chapter 10, Daniel prays, and it takes him 21 days to get a response. And in that response, there's Michael, the archangel, is helping to get through this, to break through these forces that are out there. And there's the prince of Persia is mentioned. That prince of Persia is a demonic force that is taking Persia and trying to use Persia, the powers of Persia, to use them to wage war against God's people. I think to keep the prophecies from being fulfilled. A little bit later, we say the prince of Greece is about to come. And then it says Michael, your prince, who would be the prince of, we'll just say, Israel. There's war in another realm, brother, a lot bigger sometimes than I think we think about. It's huge. Ezekiel 28, the lamentation against the king of Tyre, this prophecy against the king of Tyre. And as that prophecy starts against the king of Tyre, you figure out really soon, it's not just against the king of Tyre. It's against the power behind the throne. That prophecy ends up being against Satan himself. The same with the prophecy in Isaiah 14 against the king of Babylon. It's not just against the king of Babylon, it's the power behind that throne. The beast from the earth. Scripture talks about doctrines of demons. It's not, sometimes it's important for me. There are evil people in this world who have signed up knowingly, willfully, are agents of the devil. But it's also important for me to realize, you ever wonder sometimes, this evil that we see around us, that we see human beings engaged in, in one sense, it really is demonic possession. It is Satan who's working these things through. These doctrines of demons. It's not like the Catholic Church has just sat there and cooked all this stuff up on their own. It's Satan who's coming up with these speculations, etc., that are waging war against the truth of Christ. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the man of lawlessness. Let's read this one really quick. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. I think we get a little picture of the Pope and Catholicism, but lots of other things are connected with that and have come from that. But in verse 8, then that lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth and bring to an end by the appearance of his coming. That is, the one whose coming is in accord with the activity of Satan, with all powers and signs and false wonders, and with all the deception of wickedness for those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth so as to be saved. Why all this false doctrine out there? Because Satan is working these things in the minds of people that are held captive by him to do as well. How about Babylon the harlot? I'm just going to talk about for a second, some of the economic forces. There's some things that are worth thinking about. It's not just Trump and Biden. Those are the puppets that we're allowed to see. When you understand it, there was a book I read years ago, and there's multiple ones, but Shadows of Power. And you actually start seeing there are a lot of hidden economic powers behind the rulers of this world. Those guys are just doing what they're told. Trump himself, even though I personally appreciate a lot of things that he did, but there's an agenda there to get us to the point where we are today. Trump played his part. He did what he was supposed to do. You just understand nobody gets there unless they're on the team with the hidden powers, the monetary forces behind it. Ezekiel 28:16, as in that prophecy against Satan, it says, because of the abundance of your trade. In Revelation 18, it talks about the fall of Babylon the harlot, but we get a picture of that, all these merchants, the economic forces, the trade that's going, even dealing in human cargoes. There's no human slavery today, is there? not human trafficking. Where's that come from? Big forces. Woodrow Wilson, way back in 1913, he said some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacture are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know that there's a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. That's 1913. Think things have gotten better in that way? Now, what's amazing is you start following this plan back, and you're going to see that a plan over centuries, that's not of human origin. That's not of human evil. That's satanic. And that's the battle that we're engaged in. That's the world of darkness. That's that domain. And an individual scale. Book of Revelation talks about men having the mark of the beast, and sometimes they say that's your co-workers, etc. But I just want you to think about even how this plays out. In terms of Pontius Pilate. He's part of that government, right? Now, Pontius Pilate, did he really want to himself personally? He didn't want Jesus to be handed over. But Pilate's susceptible to something, wasn't he? As soon as his position was going to be threatened, he had to cave. Held captive by Satan to do his will. The Sanhedrin themselves, these guys there's some jealousy that's going on. They're held captive by those deeds of the flesh. They're going to, turn Jesus over. The synagogue rulers, the blind man. And Jesus heals this blind guy, and they start putting his parents under trial. How'd this guy become able to see? And the parents are afraid to even say. So he's of age, ask him, because they know if they say it was by Jesus, already at that point in time, anybody who confessed Jesus as Lord is going to be tossed out of the synagogue. There's individuals that are susceptible to Satan. How about Judas himself? Guys, Judas is one of the most spiritually interested guys on the face of the earth. He's down there, John the Immerser, checking it out, listening. He's one of the guys Jesus chooses, but man, sin gets in there and it got a hold of him. And that sin, the guilt being exposed, it's really interesting to me. Towards the end there, you see Jesus and Judas having a conversation, and nobody else has a clue what it's about, except for Jesus and Judas. But Scripture says Satan then entered into him, and he went out. He already been being worked on to a point here now where Satan enters into him. This is the world of darkness. And in case you didn't make the connection from Charlie, every one of us was once there, held captive in that environment. Been rescued from that. I don't remember where if I left this out of my notes, but one other thing I want to communicate before I move on. I read a book a number of years ago called 12 Years a Slave, a guy named Solomon Northup. And I don't remember all the details because a number of years ago I read it. 1841 or so is the setting, and this guy was a free man, upstate New York, free black man. A couple con men got him, and he wakes up. They drugged him. He wakes up, all of his identification taken away, anything they could have. He's chained, and they move this guy off to the slave states. Now you're a free black man. But you're stuck in the slave states with no identification, no proof, no means of communication, of getting it. How are you going to get out of that? Multiple times he tried to change his position and to get back out, and every time it backfired on him. This is the world under the control of Satan. This is individuals under the control of Satan. Every time you try on your own, he'll just knock you down. Get the rope around you with your toes hanging off. You're going to do what I say? Let you down. And this is the serious nature in a spiritual realm of where we were. And we don't want to be people who've forgotten our purification from our former sins. Amen? That world of darkness. Remember where we came from. God's rescued us from that. Those Old Testament examples of deliverance, I mean, they're awesome. But they really aren't so much about, I think Matthew said recently, David and the midget. David and the giant. Wouldn't be quite the same if it was David and the midget, would it? Okay? But David and Goliath, that Israel as a whole, what's that a picture of? God setting us free from bondage to Satan. God carrying us through the waters. God giving us a new life, a new start. So we have that on a large scale. The individual examples we got, Daniel, lion's den, etc. All those physical pictures are here to point us the spiritual deliverance that we brought through Jesus Christ. Now I want you to think for just a second with me what it took for Jesus to rescue us. He had to leave his place in glory and come down here and take on the devil on the devil's home turf without any advantages of being God. Totally in the flesh, just like we are. 100% human while he is here. Tempted in all ways as we are, yet without sin. That's impressive to me. He had to be willing to go to the cross, to offer himself up. Did he have authority to lay his life down? It's his choice, wasn't it? And willing to do that. He had to go down. I kind of like the picture of Romans chapter 10. You want to be saved by works? Here, try this on for size. You go down into the abyss. You go down to Sheol. You break the bonds of sin and death. You carry that up, and then we'll have a conversation. Anybody, I think, was Josiah talking about fear this morning? You can't live in fear. But contemplate just for a second. I'm sure we all have. But death. When death's staring you in the face, let's do it this way. In case you say, yeah, I have zero fear of death. When you hit an icy patch on the road and your car do you get any of that fight or flight? There's something about the other side we never experienced it. Going through that door, what's it going to be? There's some natural trepidation there. Where was I going with that? Jesus himself, he had to go through that, didn't he? But while he was there, he snapped those bonds of sin and of death. He rose from the dead. And then he ascended into heaven. In the process, Satan kicked out of heaven. And really in the picture of him being marched through the streets in captivity. But this is what it took for Jesus to rescue us. It's a pretty big operation. Go back with me for a second to the book of Habakkuk. Just like this picture. Habakkuk chapter 3. I just want to read verses 13 and really the first half of 14. It said, Thou didst go forth for the salvation of thy people, for the salvation of thine anointed. Thou didst strike the head of the house of the evil, to lay him open from thigh to neck. Thou didst pierce with his own spears the head of his throngs. Friend, that's what Jesus has done for us. He went into the house of evil, the head of the house of evil. He used his own weapons against him, and he ripped him wide open. That's what this rescue is about. A good place to be, being rescued from that domain of darkness. And there's deliverance with that. I think we get the picture. I will say this one I want to throw in here. Does the Lord know how to rescue the godly from temptation? And he rescued us from that domain of darkness, and now we're in this kingdom, but there's still the tempter there. And this power that Jesus had to rescue us, he knows how to rescue the godly from temptation. And this is a little bit of in reference to some physical things, but I'm going to use a little liberty and apply it spiritually. He will yet deliver us. God is the deliverer. He knows how. He will. He's brought us into the kingdom of his beloved Son. There's another kingdom, the kingdom of Christ. And there's a lot of confusion in that denominational world about the kingdom. Matter of fact, everything that I see out there in the denominational world has it all wrong. Whether it's premillennial, postmillennial, whatever, they don't understand what the kingdom is. It's important, like I said earlier, for us, if we're going to understand the scriptures, if we're going to understand who we are, let's just make this really simple. How effective are you going to be? I'm going to break this down to the simplest thing. How effective are you going to be in a basketball game if you don't even know which team you're on? They might sit you down on the bench for a little while, and if you still don't figure out which team you're on, they might throw you in the stands. If you still can't figure out which team you're supposed to be for, they'll toss you out of the building, right? And this is an important thing. We got to understand where we are. And so Colossians 1:13 is a really key verse in this. Let's go back and look at this again. Colossians 1, where we started from. Verse 13, for he delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son. What are the tense of these verbs? Delivered, transferred. It's past tense, isn't it? Now, Jesus, we know, Jesus affirmed he's a king. And he has a kingdom. Jesus, before Pontius Pilate, he says, my kingdom, what? It's not of this realm. If it were, my servants would be fighting. As it is, my kingdom is not of this realm. Okay. And then he goes on, Pilate says, so you are a king. And I love this. Pilate's trying to put Jesus on trial, and very soon Pilate's on trial. You can tell the whole interchange here is Pilate's the one, you are a king. Jesus says, you say correctly, I'm a king. For this I've been born, and for this I've come into the world to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who's of the truth hears my voice. Jesus is a king, and he has a kingdom, but it's a spiritual kingdom. I'll ask you guys a question. How many of you, if you followed it at all, the Olympics, how many of you just naturally found yourself cheering for the United States? Anybody in here? Wow, most of you guys don't care, I don't think, but did anybody see that China in the medal count? China was ahead in the medal count. It's kind of they put gold medals. And so the U.S. was ahead in the totals the whole way, but they go first by gold because that's first place. So China was ahead pretty much up till the last day. And then the U.S. came out with the win, right? We had the greatest medal count, most golds, most total. But in the China media world, China won. Okay? They went ahead and included Hong Kong and I think a couple other places as theirs. Okay? To make sure that they had the win. Okay? And you kind of say, come on. Okay? We won't talk about what the U.S. media lies to us about right now. But, I find myself going for the U.S. I don't know these guys from anybody, but there's something about I am a U.S. citizen, and I'm cheering for those guys. And I will say, there's nothing... Matter of fact, by the nature, way God designed things, there is a special love that we have for our physical family. There is a special love that we have for the town in which we live. There is a special love for our state, for this country. I mean, that's something that God, in the nature of the way He designs things, there's a special love there that is okay. And the Apostle Paul would say that I myself could wish that I were accursed for the sake of my kinsmen according to the flesh, right? There's a special love there. But there's a transfer that's taken place that we got to shift our thinking. Some of us still see ourselves primarily as American citizens. And brother, America is probably the greatest purporter of those evil things that we see in the world than anyone else. The monetary stuff that's going out, the filth, the immorality, that's coming from this country, being spread throughout the whole world. When you get to travel the world a little bit, one of the things you see, I don't know about China, how much they censor, but the rest of the world, they're trying to copy what they see going on in the U.S. It being promoted from here. I'm not primarily an American citizen, and neither are you. We've been rescued from that world of darkness. Now, some of us, we still want to fight for freedom in this country. And there are principles of liberty that the Scripture puts forth that I think we should stand up for those things of liberty. But, brethren, we aren't going to save America. Babylon falls. It always does. And there's a final crash. You know what we need to be doing? Understanding who we are as the kingdom and building and pushing forth the kingdom. That's where our efforts and our energies need to be. The kingdom of Christ, I'm just going to throw these verses up here. We actually covered it in adult Bible school class last Lord's Day. This question came up. Kingdom of Christ does equal the kingdom of God. These terms are used as synonymously. The kingdom of God is equal to the kingdom of heaven. And what is the kingdom? Well, Colossians 1:13 gives us a huge hint in the fact that we've already been delivered from the domain of darkness and we've been transferred into the kingdom. The kingdom is the church, isn't it? I'll say the church on into heaven. Revelation chapter 1. Let's turn there real quick. A couple interesting verses in the preliminary part of the book of Revelation. Most of Revelation is symbolic, and it tells you that. But there's some early preliminary information that are some plain statements of fact within this book. In Revelation 1 verse 6, He has made us to be a kingdom, priest to His God and Father. We're already made to be a kingdom, aren't we? Revelation 1 verse 9, I, John, your brother and fellow partaker in the tribulation and kingdom and perseverance which are in Jesus. John was, who wrote this, the Apostle John, he was a fellow partaker in the kingdom. The kingdom's here. The kingdom is the church. I know most of us know this, but this stuff you got to know. And you got to make sure that this is the way that you see the spiritual realm. There's a shift in preaching as you move from the Gospels to the book of Acts. In the Gospels, it's the kingdom of heaven is at hand, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. You get the book of Acts, and it's like the good news about the kingdom. The kingdom's here. Part of the preaching of the gospel is understanding who we are in the kingdom. You know, in Matthew 16:28 and Mark 9:1, a little different terminology, but Jesus said there are some of those standing here who will not taste death. I'll use Mark's account until they see the kingdom of God after it's come with power. That happened the day of Pentecost, the beginning of the church. So, again, we know that. We've been transferred. When did this transfer take place? We've been removed from this. I couldn't find a great picture of transfer, so I just pictured somebody transferring from one college to another. Some of you people that are thinking about U of M might want to think about, making that transfer over to the good school. That's for you, Tim. So I got the floor. This is not open class time. No open mic. So, in a spiritual sense, okay, when did this transfer take place? Okay. Well, we know, John chapter 3, verses 3 through 5, Jesus talking to Nicodemus, and he says, unless you're born again, you can't see the kingdom. Nicodemus doesn't understand it. Jesus gives a little further explanation. He says, unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he can't enter into the kingdom. Brother, our entrance, that transfer took place when we were immersed into Christ. And as such, we've been given a brand new life. A lot bigger deal than going from a grizzly to a bobcat. I was going to say grizzly commie, but I decided not to. Okay, well, we've moved from that domain of darkness into the kingdom of God's beloved. It's a new life with that. There's a connection with forgiveness of sins in the kingdom. Don't have time to hit that. It's there. And we are now citizens of a heavenly kingdom. I want you to really think about this. How do you see yourself? What's your primary means, your identity? Is it you live in Belgrade, Montana? Is it that you're a United States citizen? Or do you see yourself as a citizen of heaven? Philippians 3:20, our citizenship is in heaven. Amen? So I used Mikkel as an example last week. I'm going to use him again. On our trips to the Philippines, one of them, Mikkel has a number of years, he had a green card. And was able to do, most things with his green card, have his business and everything. But a few years ago, he wanted to become a citizen of the United States. And so he had to go through a process. So he's not just, doesn't just have his green card, but he's actually a citizen of the United States of America. So he went through this process, and you got to, go through the studying, take the tests, etc. I don't know exactly what the tests are. I know you have to kind of somewhere swear your allegiance, right? Give an oath of allegiance to this country. And it's amazingly, strikingly similar to what God wants from us when we go from the domain of darkness to the kingdom of his beloved Son. I was here yesterday, and Josiah confessed Jesus is Lord. And Phil asked the rest of us, hey, you guys want to basically repeat that? Because we are, right? That's not a one-time confession thing, but it's essential. It's required for a person to actually come into Christ. You have to say, Jesus is Lord. That means that Caesar is not. Jesus is Lord. There's a transfer of allegiance. Hey, we know we're immersed into Christ. We get our birth certificate, hey, as citizens of this kingdom. But there's another part of it that Mikkel kind of wrapped up with that I liked, and I called them yesterday to make sure that I had this right. And there's an expectation to assimilate. What does that mean? Well, Webster's dictionary for this, in this context, assimilation refers to the process through which individuals and groups of differing heritages acquire the basic habits, attitudes, and mode of life of an embracing culture. In other words, in the case of Canada to the United States, Mikkel didn't have to denounce his Canadian citizenship. He's allowed to actually be a joint citizen, but he had to say, United States first. If there's a question of allegiance, it's with the United States. And the expectation is, if you become a citizen of the United States, no matter where you came from, the expectation is that you're going to assimilate into this culture. Now, I know there's a culture war that even in that world is against it. But this is the basic principles, and it's understandable, right? You want to be a citizen of a new place. You guys notice all the California plates in so many of these houses that are being built? Okay, fine, people want to move here, but what do we always say? If you come here, don't try to change it back to be like California, right? You got out of there because you didn't like it, you're going to come here, then be a Montanan. It's that concept. Guys, we come into the kingdom of God, and there is an expectation of a new way of life that is a kingdom life. It's in the light, not in the darkness. It's a life of holiness and righteousness and following Christ, picking up our cross daily, not of selfishness, being governed by the flesh. Interesting thing. Solomon Northup, after 12 years, and he finally gets his freedom. Do you expect that guy would want to go back and put himself back under the servitude of those masters that tried to beat everything out of him? I asked Mikkel, is the expectations that you would assimilate? He's like, yes, they are. And he says, why would you want to go back? Well, if you want to become a citizen, why wouldn't you want to? Well, that's a good spiritual question, isn't it? We wanted freedom. Christ rescued us. He brought us into a new way. This master we're willing to serve with everything that we have. Brother, I just want to encourage us, remember who we are. We're citizens of the heavenly kingdom. We walk in a new way of life, in remembering who we are. We've been rescued from that terrible domain of darkness. We've been set free, been transferred to the kingdom of Christ, been given an amazing new life. One thing Solomon Northup did do, after going through that experience, you know what were his thoughts? I want to help other people that have been in the same, because he saw it. He saw the beatdowns. He saw the terrible atrocities that happened to some of those slave women. We saw it. We were a part of it. I appreciated Charlie's this morning. That just fits in perfect. You experienced it. You know what we want to do? We want to be actively engaged. Solomon Northup was actively engaged in going and trying to help free slaves. That's what we want to do. We understand what's been given to us.